my name is Katie Burdett, your host for this season's Red Pen podcast, where we assess the art of writing on a collegiate level and across the disciplines. This season's theme is centered around AI and how it's drastically been impacting the writing space for the last few years. And for this episode, we're going to be focused on entertainment media studies and what AI kind of looks like on a local and global media scale. This week's amazing guest is Dr. Benjamin Hahn. Did you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, my name is Benjamin Hahn. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Entertainment Media Studies in the Grady College. My work focuses on race in global media, particularly looking at the cultural intersections between East Asia and Latin America.
Awesome. Okay, so I know we talked a little bit before this interview, but can you just go over a little bit maybe how you've seen AI interact in your discipline and how you've been reacting to that interaction?
Yes, so there's a lot of anxiety, of course, around artificial intelligence, especially in the academia, particularly in the media industry, because the idea that artificial intelligence might replace human creativity, and how can we make best use of AI in terms of like writing, in terms of creating content for the global audiences. So, I mean, I've been kind of following kind of the discussions and kind of the arguments. And, it's important to think about, how artificial intelligence can also be used as an effective tool, I think, not as a substitute of human creativity, but how it can also complement the work that, writers do or even content producers do. So, it's an exciting time, but also, we need to kind of establish clear guidelines in terms of how we can use AI in an ethical way.
Right, right. Of course. We actually have had guests on here. Dr. Davis, who works in the philosophy department, actually was kind of our first ethics discussion, and we
Mhm.
talked a lot about that, which was really cool and really enlightening. So how about your discipline here at UGA? Like, have there been any memorable instances where AI has been kind of brought up around you, or have your colleagues kind of mentioned it to you? Just a specific instance that you could think of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in Grady College, I mean, we have like screenwriting classes, and I think kind of the urge or kind of the, the kind of maybe the temptation to kind of use AI to create like scenes or maybe help you write a good script, or maybe if you're developing a character, how it can also be used as a tool to kind of research. So those are some of the main discussions. When we think about in the
Mhm.
media industry, of course, we have AI in terms of dubbing, subtitling, and also, creating like idol groups for global audiences. And these are kind of the ongoing discussions that I've been hearing a lot from other people.
Gotcha. So kind of a hot topic right now about entertainment media studies and AI has been the Writers Guild strike. So using, media or using writers' media to train AI and how like businesses have been kind of profiting off of that has been a huge ethical dilemma recently. What were kind of your initial reactions to this? And how did it affect your work to any degree, or did it? And did it affect your colleagues' work, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that, for instance, you can maybe studios can produce a script using AI and then maybe give it to a writer to make revisions or to even adapt it are some of the kind of the questions, right, that have informed the Writers Guild kind of strike. And of course, they have engaged in negotiations to establish clear guidelines that that is not acceptable, that you should not replace human creativity. But one thing that I think is important is we have a tendency to kind of celebrate kind of AI as a new technology and how it can diversify representations or storytelling, but also for me kind of the inherent bias of technology of AI to continue to reinforce or perpetuate um, stereotypes of marginalized groups. So let's say you ask an AI to create an Asian character, and maybe it creates a character, but it continues to reinforce some of the stereotypes associated with Asian men, such as like they're passive and so on. So I think we have to really consider that, it does not necessarily just expand questions about diversity, but it can also refine certain ideologies that we have about other people. So, that's one kind of concern that I have, especially as it relates to questions about diversity. Yeah.
Gotcha. And just kind of an opinion question, do you find yourself erring more on the AI is bad camp? Because we talked about this a little bit in my
Hmm.
previous two episodes, is that like who is the bad guy? Is there a bad guy? And do you think that we can categorize AI as bad or good type of thing? So as you're talking about with like stereotypes and
Hmm.
reinforcing stereotypes and marginalized groups, are you finding yourself that you're a lot more on the skepticism side of the debate than you would be maybe saying like, oh, this could be a better thing, or how you
Yeah, I
feel?
mean, I think there's always a kind of good intention when you develop technologies, right, for a good purpose. But
Hmm.
I think the problem becomes when it becomes kind of commodified, right? As like media industries or the Silicon Valley or other companies are trying to capitalize on the technology to generate more revenues or
Hmm.
to take an easier route to produce content. So I mean, we can talk about like the K-pop idols that have been developed by AI, and it's great maybe that they're diversifying the members in terms of their different talents, but also, you know, it takes a lot of financial kind of resources to train idols. And, there has been a lot of articles that, they are engaged in these long contracts for, decades being trained, like in terms of vocal training in order to make it. But, with AI, these companies do not necessarily have to invest that much time, right? And if
Hmm.
it's not successful, they can create a new idol group. So, there is kind of, how it's trying to replace the human labor, right? And to find a quick route to produce content that will appeal to audiences, I think is also another concern. So I'm not necessarily, consider like AI as a bad thing, but, how can we use effectively, ethically, so it does not undermine the value of human creativity.
Right. You actually dipped a lot into my next question about, I know your work is really concerned with global media
Yeah.
and cultural intersections and Korean pop culture. So, has AI kind of been this international discussion that you've been seeing recently? And what are the kind of the implications of this? Because I know, like there was a big K-pop group, I'm sure you know
Hmm.
BTS, who had to serve their military service, so they had to
Yeah.
take a break till 2024. And kind of AI coming in and like replacing or filling the spaces of
Hmm.
these groups who are traditionally going into
Yeah.
military service. Like
Hmm.
how do you feel like that's kind of impacting culture?
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at kind of the culture of idols, I think despite their kind of talents in terms of singing or performing, it's also kind of the intimacy that they develop with their fans
Mm.
through interactions, like in fan meetings, or in the case of BTS, like using V Live to communicate with their fans. And this is a very important part of fandom, right? To establish the human connection that you can identify with the celebrities as your own, right? And I think that's very important, but I don't know how much can AI replace that, right? Kind of express, right, kind of these intimate, feelings, or can you find resonance with their fans? And I guess it's possible, but how can you do that? And in terms on a global scale, I mean, we have seen a lot of questions about dubbing, right? As content needs to get dubbed into multiple languages, like
Mhm.
platforms like Netflix,
Right.
want to have good subtitles or good dubbing, and they're relying on AI to do that. But that also brings up, the question: if you're using an AI to create a voice of a Black character, what are these ethical implications, right? And so on. And so it's a ongoing discussion. But for instance, there was a Netflix series called Mask Girl, where one of the voices of, I think, one of the protagonists, when she goes on a live broadcast in the show, was created by AI. So, and so, I mean, and or to create a voice of a character in his 30s, right? To make it more authentic. So, I mean, they're using AI to kind of add more authenticity to the characters and storytelling, but there are also kind of the negative implications of that.
Yeah, so I guess too in terms of audience reaction, I know
Mhm.
there's a K-pop group called Eternity that I think is
Yeah.
entirely AI based. We saw something like this in the US like a few years back. There was this YouTube and TikTok like Instagram
Mhm.
personality called Little Michaela, and she
Mhm.
was entirely virtual. And like audiences had a really weird reaction to her because in a lot of like her videos, she was
Yeah.
trying to convince everybody that she was real. She wasn't just playing into the fact that she was actually fake. Do you know Korean audiences? How are they reacting to this?
I haven't followed the audience kind of response, but I think maybe it's a mixed response, right? There's those that really kind of celebrate kind of
Right.
the younger generations who are willing to technology and how these can really cater to their experiences. And I think in today's kind of contemporary media landscape, experience is really key. So,
Hmm.
it's whether you're watching a TV series on Netflix, they really want to enhance the experience. So, using AI in terms of algorithmic recommendation systems to
Hmm.
recommend TV shows or movies that might fit your particular mood
Hmm.
on the day. So experience becomes key. And I think some people like it because it's really catering to their taste and experiences, while others are very kind of skeptic, kind of, display their skepticism toward it, right? Because it's
Right.
still, right, is not real. And, there's that kind of the human element that's missing.
Introduce yourself to the remarkable world of talented undergraduate scholars and explore works across the humanities, arts, and sciences. Visit UGA's Classic Journal, the writing intensive program's journal of undergraduate writing and research. The Classic Journal unites young writers across the disciplines to create powerful and meaningful work that impacts any reader. Students are welcome to submit their work and gain insight and experience into publishing. So, whether you're a writer extraordinaire or a curious mind ready to explore, the Classic Journal invites you to join this literary expedition. Your voice matters, your ideas count, and your journey begins here. Visit theclassicjournal.uga.edu or follow us on Instagram @classicwriting.
Yeah. So I guess do you feel like there's any dangers in doing this and finding kind of role models who like are actually not real? Like, do you think that this is like perpetuating a beauty standard or perpetuating
Mhm.
any type of something like that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it has a tendency, right, to reinforce kind of these dominant ideologies, right? Because,
Right.
you're creating a perfect kind of an image, right, in terms of beauty, in terms of the way they speak, they act. So, which does not, cannot measure, right, to the standards, right, to human standards. So, yeah, I think there's a danger of kind of, perpetuating, reinforcing these
Right.
hegemonic ideologies and continue to produce that, even
Mhm.
though maybe its intention is to counter it, but it kind of keeps reproducing the same dominant ideologies, the ideas.
I got you. So I know a little bit of your research is in the intersection
Yeah.
between East Asia and Latin America. Can you maybe speak to how you imagine AI amplifying pre-existing issues in either East Asia or Latin America or intersectionally or whatever?
I mean, that's a good question. AI can maybe foster better dialogues in terms of languages, right? For to have a better kind of communications, right? Because of the lack of the language barriers might prevent one from developing kind of cultural connections. So maybe AI can also kind of play a role in that. But
Hmm.
that's a question that I have to think about more, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's something I didn't think about was like language barriers and stuff like that. That's
hmm
really
Yeah,
interesting.
because for like people maybe outside the US, who might not be native speakers,
Mhm.
they can also use AI as a proofreading tool, right? And
Right.
as a way to help them with their, writing skills, which is a good thing, right? They're not using it to relying on AI to create work for them, but they're just using it as a tool to improve their kind of writing or language skills and so on.
Right, right. So just to bring it back a little bit to maybe like a classroom perspective, have you experienced AI in your classroom in these recent years?
I haven't directly experienced, but I'm sure a lot of students are using AI as research tools, to have quick access to information, or just like how we use Google, right, to search for information, how AI can also be a tool. But I haven't come across any kind of incidents where students have relied on AI. And I think, as we have to also be very strategic in terms of kind of the assignments that we create, so that students are not just relying on AI
Right.
to create work. Instead, how can they also incorporate their own ideas and critical skills, right? So I think that's very important.
Gotcha. How do you feel maybe AI has just impacted Grady College as a whole, just your department in general, or even UGA at large, if you have any like, colleagues in other colleges and stuff like that? How do you feel like the culture maybe in the college space is changing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the concerns is, how do we address this issue of AI? I mean, it'll be impossible to ban it, right? But how can we educate students to use it effectively, right? And to realize the industry, allows, right, professionals to use AI. So, how can we train students to use AI in an effective and ethical manner, right? So, when you have to maybe create a script, how it can be a useful resource, instead of just asking AI, generate a coffee scene with two characters in their 30s and see how it creates. So it's a challenge. It's difficult because it's relatively new. I think a lot of people are still grappling, how to address it in a very effective way. But as time progresses, we might have a better understanding of, how it is being used and how we can develop, good guidelines. Yeah.
Right. And I guess just like same question, but in a future context, how do you feel, if it hasn't yet, influenced your field in the coming years? Do you feel like we're gonna be able to reach that point to where we don't ban it, but we find guidelines to be like, okay, let's use this for better, let's use this for whatever? Or do you feel like it's kind of a snowball effect? Do you feel like it might get worse and people might, start to commodify things that they shouldn't and start to kind of exacerbate these problems that we're kind of facing right now?
Yeah, I think we'll be able to have a better grasp as time goes on. And, when new technologies are introduced, there's always anxiety, right? About, the impact that will have and how it's going to impact and shape society. But, I think, we as humans are smarter than AI, so we'll be able to kind of figure out how to deal with it. Especially in an academic setting or even in the industry. But there will be always, people or institutions that capitalize it in a negative way. So that's also, a concern that we must think about.
Right. And so how do you feel that AI has presented itself as its biggest kind of confrontation to your work, like in terms of I know we just talked a little bit about the classroom, but this can be also just in a research scale, a general practice scale. How do you feel like you've been most confronted with AI?
Well, I think, as someone who was trained in kind of the humanities, right? How do you also incorporate AI into your research? I think it's one of the challenges. Everybody is, kind of espousing interdisciplinary research. So, as media studies scholar, how do I bring in AI in my own work, which is a challenge, and how do I study this technology when I might not have the necessary skills to do that? I was recently at a conference, at a humanities conference in South Korea, and a lot of the discussion was centered on AI, right? In terms of digital humanities, how can we use AI to expand like world literature, to have a better understanding of, what kinds of literary works are being taught in the US and outside the US. So, there's a lot of kind of anxiety, and people are asking questions like, then practically, how can we, collaborate with like scientists, data scientists, and people who have a better knowledge of AI in terms of technology, and to establish productive collaborations? And that's a challenge, right?
Right.
Because how do we use the tools when we really don't know about coding or things
Right.
like that? Yeah.
Right. You got me interested about that conference. Was there something that maybe caught your eye at the conference that you were like, this is like a big question that I've been thinking about, or like the most interesting panel maybe you attended?
Yeah, I mean, there was a panel about kind of literature and AI and like digital humanities, and one of the panelists was speaking like, we tend to think there's an infinite amount of data out there, and that's really driving everyone very anxious. But
Mm-hmm.
he argued that data has to be also kind of coded in a way. So when you search for books on libraries, even though we might not think about it, there's also kind of this, I think, like meta text or what metadata that has to be categorized based on the genre. So and he kind of urges not to be too kind of, don't panic too much, right? Because yeah, it's not like there's an infinite amount of data. It has to be still coded and be available for researchers and people. Yeah. So it was very interesting as someone who really doesn't know how kind of that process works. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting actually. I guess my final question for you would just be, is there any maybe advice you want to give or kind of a final statement on just how you're resting right now and just kind of talk to audiences about how, like you said, maybe there's nothing to be afraid of, something like that.
I think, I mean, the like the creative kind of the human creativity, I think, is something that I think cannot be replaced by technologies, I think. And so, I would like to encourage students to continue to develop their critical and analytical thinking skills, and not to be too dependent on
Mhm,
AI,
mhm,
even though it can be maybe a useful tool to complement your work. Yeah. So,
mhm.
and yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Yeah. I was talking to Dr. Davis actually for the first episode of this, and he said there was times where people were kind of testing AI and being like, "Oh, tell me a joke," and it would just like say a sentence because like
Hmm.
it can't even like grasp what like humor is or like what.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I just think stuff like that is so funny, and especially like how you're saying, replacing the human creativity is essentially impossible.
yeah,
Like, I feel like I completely agree on that.
yeah,
I think definitely the issue comes in when maybe it's more so about companies profiting
yeah.
off of
Hmm.
artists' work, which I feel like we've talked about a good bit.
Yeah, and like the nuances of like cultural differences, when
Yeah.
you're like cultural translation, and how does AI possess the knowledge, right, to engage, and be sensitive, right, to a lot of these differences exist when whether it's asking for information and so on, which is and you have to train AI to get smarter, right? So
Right.
so that's also something that we have to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you so much for coming on this podcast. I really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna put all of your links to any work of yours that I find in the description just so
Sure.
people can easily reference you. But Dr. Hunt, thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate it. If you just want to say bye, that's totally fine. I didn't
Yeah,
hear.
thank you for having me. Yeah, I
Yeah, of
really enjoyed the
course.
conversation. Thank
Yeah,
you.
this was really enlightening. I really appreciate it. You gave a great perspective,
Okay.
so appreciate
Hopefully it's helpful.
it. Yeah, yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.